The 1911 is one of the most iconic firearms in history. Designed by John Browning, the 1911 was the standard issue sidearm of the U.S. military from 1911 to 1985. While Colt produced the original, almost every major firearm company has produced its own version. It's wildly revered for its reliability, crisp trigger, and is still a favorite for all types of shooters. Whether you're looking to buy or build a 1911 and just about everything for guns, log on to midwayusa.com.
Boat Trader, America's largest boating marketplace, offering easy financing and over 100,000 boat listings to choose from. Sell, find, and finance new or used boats on America's largest boating marketplace. Visit BoatTrader.com to get started.
Welcome to the Casting Across Fly Fishing Podcast. I'm Matthew of castingacross.com, where I explore the quarry and culture of fly fishing. And I'm happy that you are along for the ride this 293rd episode of the podcast. Now, I had a podcast topic laid out. It was ready to roll, and I actually had jotted a few things down, and then thunderstruck. Not the song by AC/DC, but actual thunder actually outside my house. And it made me stop, made sure that my laptop had enough batteries, that if the power went out, I'd be good to go. But then it also got me thinking. The last time I was in a really nasty thunderstorm, I was about 20 yards from a trout steering, and I was sitting underneath a pavilion waiting for that storm to pass and Googling, how long should I wait after a storm passes before I go back outside? Because although I'm confident that that information was shared with me when I was a child at elementary school, I couldn't remember. I knew enough to not go out and swing my graphite rod around in the lightning, but I didn't know how long I should wait. And so that got me thinking, it is never a bad time to talk about some of the ways that we can make foolish decisions and get ourselves in big trouble when we are outside, especially fly fishing. And so there's a little bit of a clickbaity title on this week's podcast, but I think it's legitimate. There are ways that you can get hurt and ways you can die while you're doing outdoor stuff, especially fly fishing. Maybe not especially fly fishing, but fly fishing. But I think I've talked about before, at least written about before, about how drowning is one of the major reasons people die in national parks. And guess what? If you're fly fishing, you're probably going to be around water. And so it is one of those things to be aware of. So today I'm going to talk about a handful of things that I've either experienced myself or because of working with teenagers or just because of doing fly fishing education and outdoor activities that I've had to be aware of and talk people through. To start where I've already teased, it's lightning. Now, the general rule of thumb is 30 minutes after you hear the last thunder. All right, so you hear thunder, you wait half an hour. That is the general rule. There is other people that maintain, including experts, that if there's a greater than 30-second break in between thunder and lightning, it's far enough away that you are okay to go back out. But again, I will give the expert recommended advice, not me. I'm not the expert. What I read on every other website and every book I have, it's 30 minutes after that last lightning. Anything before that, you're running the risk. It's interesting that over half the people that are hit by lightning are outside doing recreational activities. It's not people gardening. It's not people running from building to building. It's not people who are commuting. It is people who are out doing stuff like fishing who get hit by lightning. And then what should you do? Well, you put that fly rod down, okay? That doesn't mean that you have to chuck it. It means you just put it a little bit further away from you. And you make sure that you're not close to it. If you are somewhere like I was, where there's a pavilion, by all means, go there. Maybe go to your car and sit in your car. If you're not near your car, don't go to the one lone tree. Go into the forest where there's lots of trees and just hang out and wait for the storm to pass. Also, make sure you're not near the highest tree that's in the forest. I mean, again, lightning is going to not aim for, you know what I mean, those tallest trees. The other things to think about too is, as you make your escape, if the water is going to rise exponentially in a short amount of time, which can happen. Another quick story. I was out for a run the other day and a storm came up as I was running, and I was at like the apex of a loop, where I just had to continue to run because turning around would have been a longer loop. And the storm came on pretty hard, and there was lots of dips in the trail, and I was running in what ended up being like calf deep puddles in a on a 3 mile return run from where I was. So when that storm water comes, depending on the topography, depending on how saturated the water is, and depending on how much water is being dumped, there's can be a lot of water. And if you're already dealing with a fast moving stream, a little bit more water can really add to something that is a little bit dangerous. And we'll talk more about water safety here in a minute, but that's something that's worth thinking about. All things being equal, the most important thing is to, one, get so where you're not the isolated object that lightning could find, and secondly, you want to be away from other large tall objects. But another thing to think about would be, you know what, if the water is going to be rising, I want to make sure I move in a direction where I'm not going to be in trouble, just even be greatly inconvenienced, if we want to be fair. So that's the first thing. Lightning is bad news. Second one, which is a lot more common and not a lot of people necessarily think about, is dehydration. Dehydration can kick in very, very quickly, whether it be the summer months and it's hot or and humid, or year-round if you're exerting yourself. And like most of us, it's a cup of gas station coffee on the way to the stream, and then it's fish, 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 walk, 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 move, 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 and not realize how hungry and thirsty you are until that headache kicks in, or until the motions that shouldn't require too much motion are painful or are tiring. So this is an interesting thing that I had a conversation with somebody about recently. A lot of times people say, man, after a day of fishing, I am just worn out. Okay, well, some of that has to do with the fact that you are wading in current. Some of that has to do with the fact that you are casting, which, unless you fish all the time, the motion of casting, especially a heavier weight rod, is going to take its toll on your shoulder and on your core. But I wonder how much of it is from the fact that not a lot of people eat a normal sized breakfast, a normal sized lunch, or a better way to put it, a meal that compensates for the extra energy that they're exerting. While some anglers are in great shape and they exercise in all sorts of ways, for some anglers, fly fishing might be their only rigorous physical activity over the course of any given month. And if that's the case, then just like if you were to pick up and run a 5K or a 10K, or you're to start lifting weights or do a spinning class or do some stretching or something like that, how you would probably be a lot more hungry after that if you hadn't done that in a while. The same thing is true of fly fishing. And so, all that to say, and point to the fact that dehydration can get you in trouble. It can make you, uncomfortable at best, and it can be dangerous at worst. I've unfortunately come across people who are in a very, very bad place because of dehydration. Help them with water, encourage them to be done fishing, and escort them back to their car. That happened more than twice that I can think of when I was living in Pennsylvania. Those hot days. There was almost this false sense of security because you're in this nice cold trout stream within a quarter mile from a town. But it really doesn't matter if you don't have water in your system, and maybe you're a little bit malnourished, which again, very few of us are truly malnourished. But if you're used to a certain amount of caloric intake and a certain level of being sedentary, then switching those things up can wreak havoc on you, and do so in a quick minute if it is particularly hot out. So what's the solution to that? It's carry water. Carry a water bottle. I have on my sling packs, I have water bottle holsters. When I used to carry vests, I had vests that had water bottle holders in the back. And when I'm really moving a lot, I choose to go with a backpack that has an integrated water bladder so that I have not only lots of water, but easy, quick access to it. I never say, it'd be a whole pain to take off the backpack and get the water bottle out. No, all I got to do is grab that hose and take a quick sip. And over the course of the day, a few liters goes really, really quickly. And it's definitely worth it. And that spread out well on your back through something like a hydration bladder is not going to be a great inconvenience at all. And stop and have a snack. There is no virtue in powering through the day and not eating anything. Have that granola bar, have that handful of nuts, even if it's a Snickers bar, for goodness sake. I mean, you're still probably going to be running in a good calorie level so that you can have that big greasy cheeseburger and that tall beer at the end of the day. You don't have to deprive yourself so that you can justify that meal after the day of fishing. And what I have found personally is if I make those choices to eat enough calories and have enough liquid in my system, is I'm not going to feel as run down by the time the day is done, and I'm going to have a lot more acuity and a lot more focus as I fish, especially in the afternoon, especially in those hot days when I'm moving a lot. We got lightning can cause you problems. Dehydration can cause you problems. The next one is wiping out, falling down. Now, this can happen in two places. And the obvious one that we talk about is in the water, because when you wipe out in the water, if you're wearing waders and that water is cold, it can be a recipe for disaster. And so, some very quick, no nonsense, simple, inexpensive tips on this. Wear a wading belt. A wading belt is not going to keep you upright, and it's not even necessarily going to keep water from flowing down your legs and to your feet, but it is going to significantly inhibit the movement of water if you were to fall in from your torso down to your waist and below. And in doing so, it will maintain air in your lower half, which will make you more buoyant as you try to regain your footing, and it will keep you warmer for longer. And in difficult circumstances where the water is really cold or it's really cold outside, having that sort of thermal protection from the waist down is very, very important for a lot of reasons. So that's the first thing. Wear that wading belt. Virtually every pair of waders comes with one. I will put the caveat on this. I do own a couple pairs of waders that shipped with a stretchy wading belt, and I get the reason for that. It's more comfortable to have a stretchy wading belt, okay? However, when you shift and stretch and move, it moves with you. And in doing so, it can allow water to get in. So I would recommend buying a standard web belt, and they're super inexpensive online. And if you buy them from certain fly fishing manufacturers, then they have maybe a little bit more ergonomic buckle, maybe a couple of bells and whistles. I like one that I have that has a big D-ring attached on the side, so I can throw something on there, whether it be have a net that's dragging behind me, or maybe even just a pair of pliers. So wading belt is the first thing. The second thing is polarized sunglasses. What do you mean polarized sunglasses? Well, I use polarized sunglasses for seeing the bottom of the river, and that has to do with determining where fish are going to be holding. That has to do with finding fish that are holding off the bottom, but also it has everything to do with seeing what the footing is like beneath me. Is it big, smooth stones? Am I going to step into mud? Am I stepping off a drop off? Being able to see where you are walking is a great way to forestall danger. Do you see the big smooth stone that's in front of you, or the big slimy rock that's in front of you? Well, if you don't have those polarized sunglasses on, you just know that there's probably something down there, and you can either feel it out very, very delicately, or you can step confidently knowing what's in front of you. So wading belt, then polarized sunglasses, and then the next thing is wear the proper wading boots. Now, what goes into a proper wading boot? As I've said before, wading boots are an underappreciated piece of fly fishing gear. Ankle support is very, very important, because as the day goes on, especially if you have mobility issues, if you have any injuries, or you just are on the river for a long time, then having that extra support in your ankles is going to give you a little bit more boost and oomph as you are moving in the water, and you're not going to be taken off your feet as easily. That's the first thing. The second thing is soles. You want to make sure you have the right soles. I am not anti-felt. I am anti-felt in places that prohibit it, which sometimes I think is a little bit of an overreaction, but felt is a great surface, so is sticky rubber. But my absolute favorite across the board is sticky rubber with studs. Sticky rubber with studs. I use that almost everywhere, and I do not buy that it's going to spook fish. Why is that? Stick your head underwater. There is so many dings, clicks, noises that happen. If you watch all of the things that are happening underwater, unless you're fishing the stillest, calmest Spring Creek pool that has a rock bottom for some reason, which I don't think many of them do, you're probably not going to be spooking a whole lot of fish. But like I said, you use the sole that works best for you, but be considerate about that as you buy them. And if you have a pair of boots that you don't have studs on, go out and buy some studs. There's a number of options. There's a lot of great articles out there. But then also don't be afraid to carry a wading staff. There's no shame in carrying a wading staff, whether it be a fancy collapsible one you clip on your belt, or it just be a big long stick that you have dragging behind you while you're fishing. That is going to be another great way to wade safely. And then, and this is something I should probably preach to myself more than I do, the danger increases exponentially the deeper you get over your knees. All right. So I'm not saying don't fish over your knees. I'm just saying that is where you really start to lose the dexterity and the ability to react well if you start to fall over, because your buoyancy is going to be working against you when you start to slip. But then also you have a lot more water pressing against you as you get deeper. I mean, unless you have a very interesting leg makeup, your thighs are a lot bigger than your calves, and so there's going to be a lot more water pushing against us, especially even the way that waders are constructed. So that's just another thing to think of. So lightning, then dehydration, then wading. The next one that is definitely worth thinking about is how nature wants to kill you. Okay. Now, I'm not talking about bears, although certain places there's lots of bears. I'm not talking about moose, although there's moose in certain places. Um, there are a lot of things that are worth paying attention to. A buddy and I drove hours and hours, and we hiked a mile down into a ravine. And within the first 5 minutes, a beehive was disturbed, and many stings transpired. And before you knew it, we were hiking back up the hillside, driving hours and hours back home. All right. What was the problem? The problem here was we saw it and we didn't steer clear. Other instances, poison ivy. I've come very, very close to rattlesnakes. And truth be told, there is a legitimate danger of bears. Now, not everywhere, not all the time, but all of these things are worth paying attention to. I don't have the time in this podcast, certainly this episode, to go into detail about every one of these things. How to identify poison ivy, how to identify poison oak and poison sumac, how to treat a bee sting when you're on the water, how to deal with somebody who's allergic to a bee sting when they're on the water. What are the best ways to deal with black bears? What are the best ways to deal with grizzly bears? What are the best way to deal with polar bears? Well, I don't think you can do a whole lot if you encounter a polar bear. What about a moose? What about an angry deer? What about a raccoon that's acting funny in the daytime? There are so many things that can happen out in the woods. How to tell the difference between a venomous and a non-venomous snake. How there's no such thing as poisonous snakes. What about spiders? What about other critters that can cause you discomfort? All of those things are absolutely worth being aware of. And for a lot of it, it's no sense figuring out how to deal with grizzly bears if you fish in Kentucky, okay? There's very little reason to pay attention to all the things that have to do with rattlesnakes if you're fishing in northern Maine. Figure out what is around where you live and where you fish, and then go from there. And there are so many resources online. The National Park Service, the Department of the Interior as a whole, has a plethora of resources. And if you don't know, ask somebody. Ask the person at the fly shop. They're going to give you some pretty decent information, and maybe even direct you to a very specific resource that you can access. Okay, we could talk ad nauseum about all sorts of things when it comes to being safe on the water. So we covered lightning, we covered dehydration, we covered falling down, and we covered wildlife and foliage and fauna. But really, what a lot of it comes down to is not overextending yourself, not doing more than you should. I find this even now, and I feel like I'm in really, really good shape, but I can't hop from rock to rock like I used to. And thankfully, there's enough fear built in that I choose not to under most situations and circumstances. That being said, only about 3 weeks ago, I was wading through some water that was getting deeper and deeper, and then I saw a downed log that got me from where I was to the other bank. It was like 2 feet underwater, and I did the balance beam kind of thing across this really deep pool. Not smart at all, didn't save me that much time, and it could have been disastrous. But that's what happens is you think, oh, this is a good idea. You start thinking about the fish more. You start thinking about time more. You may be a little hungry, a little thirsty. You have to go to the bathroom. All those things, they start to factor in, and you are working harder and not smarter. And no one ever gets hurt from working smarter. Everyone who gets hurt usually happens because they are working harder. And so that's just my encouragement to you. Make good choices. Know your limitations. You can still have plenty of fun. There are no inherent dangers or risks in fly fishing, and everything that comes in that category is environmental, and there are ways to mitigate that. Are there places you're not going to be able to fish? Maybe. Are there places that is going to just take you a lot of time to navigate as opposed to just barging right in? Yeah. But for most of fly fishing, that's probably the best approach anyway. So, is there some other aspect of safety, of danger, of the peril that exists in the woods and on the rivers that you would be interested in hearing about? Definitely let me know. Matthew at castingacross.com. I am always, for one, interested in your feedback. This week on castingacross.com, the website, http://castingacross.com. The first article is called 5 for Fathers. So Father's Day was this last Sunday, if you are listening to it in real time. So happy belated Father's Day. This article starts off celebrating this idea. Let me read from you real quick. It says, at this moment, our culture has a long list of fears. One of them is praising the virtues of fatherhood. We've lost the ability to think categorically. Easily offended, talking about good dads is perceived as a direct assault against those who didn't have good dads or those moms who are good. And then I said this, and I stand by it. It is stupid at best and dangerous societal subterfuge at worst. Fatherhood is a good thing. There's no caveat. There is no asterisk. Fatherhood is a good thing. I am so thankful that I had a good dad. I'm so thankful that I am doing my best to be a good dad. And so, with that said, I have to offer 5 things that are worth teaching your child, your child if you are a dad. But you know what? If you're a mom, if you're an uncle, if you're a grandpa, you can teach these things too. But it was Father's Day, for goodness sake. So I wrote about it in that context. And one of them has to do with how to kill a fish. So all sorts of controversy, right? All right. So that was Monday's article. Wednesday's article, well, if you want more controversy, how about this? Apple's grip and grin. So this came on the heels of me watching an entire basketball game. Not only was this the first entire basketball game I watched this season, it was the only basketball game I watched this season. I have just been busy, and I had a free night, and I anticipated the Celtics were going to win Game 5 of the NBA Finals, so I figured, hey, boys, let's watch this, because they've been watching clips and things here and there, but we had nothing going on the next day, so we all just watched it. And while I was watching it, I saw a commercial. One of the real joys of only watching streaming TV here and there and not watching a whole lot of it is not being inundated with commercials. I get plenty of marketing in all sorts of different ways, but I don't get it on my TV. But I saw a commercial that I really liked, and it involves a giant animatronic carp. And so I write about that commercial on this week's Wednesday article called Apple's Grip and Grin. And the picture is just hilarious. I was able to pause it at a really fun point in the commercial. So check that one out and watch that commercial yourself. I don't often say, hey, watch a commercial, but I'm suggesting that. But I have another recommendation this week, because this week's recommendation on the podcast is the Coolerino Lightweight Crew Socks from Duluth Trading Company. If you've listened to the podcast for any period of time, you know I'm a huge fan of the undergarments from Duluth Trading Company. And if you want a sock that provides cushion, but is also going to be nice and cool on hot summer days, whether it is inside of a neoprene bootie for waders, or you are just hiking, then I can't think of a better sock than the Coolerino from Duluth Trading Company. money. I actually only have them in the ankle height, but I am looking to buy them in the crew height, and I think I might even do so tomorrow. But they come in both ankle and they come in crew height, and they are merino and polyester, and so you get the benefits of wool, and you get the benefits also of that Coolmax polyester. I've been using Coolmax products for a long, long time. Happy with them. I like how they also don't shred or shrink into oblivion after washing them a handful of times. But I will put a link to the Coolerino Lightweight Crew Socks on this podcast's page over at castingross.com. And as per usual, this is not a paid advertisement. And I don't, if anyone at Duluth Trading Company is listening, hey, be in touch. I would love to talk more about your stuff. But anyway, I just bought it and have been given it as gifts, and I absolutely love it. But it all works well. Underwear and socks, nothing but good things to say. Thanks for listening to the Casting Across Fly Fishing Podcast. Please subscribe to your favorite podcast app and then rate your podcast on iTunes or Spotify. Then head over to castingacross.com for 3 posts a week on the people, places, and things that go into the pursuit of fish.
A life that has the stories to back it. A life to be proud of. It's a Winchester life.
Yeah, baby. 6'8" Western. Oh, mule deer, baby, right there.
Tune in every Tuesday at 7 p.m. Eastern on Waypoint TV.